But in that case, it allow us to immediately biocontain the next farm to avoid, if they would break, to continue the cycle of breaking more farms. So a tool like a geofencing software like that, like Farm Algorithm, it just make it more real and more accurate. While schedule, we all know schedule change all the time, and people don't go and correct them after the fact. So we've been seeing a lot of that where the schedule were not as accurate as they should have been after the fact. And the geofence software just don't lie. It's actually what's happening in real time.
Welcome to Swine Canada. My name is John Patience, and I'm the host for today's broadcast. And with me today, we have Karine Talbot, who is Director of Animal Health for High Life in now Steinbach, Manitoba, having moved their offices recently from La Broquerie. So welcome, Karine. How are you today?
Very good. Thank you for having me today.
Well, it's a real pleasure to have you here, and I'm really looking forward to the topic because I think it'll be of great interest to our listening audience. But before we get into that, could I ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself and how Karine Talbot got from the University of Montreal Veterinary School to be the Director of Animal Health at High Life?
Sure. So I graduated, like you said, from University of Montreal in 2008. So I'm from Quebec originally, so you can hear the French accent. I was lucky enough to work for a summer for High Tech at the time. And at the end of the summer, they offered me a full-time position. So went back, finished my vet school, and then I told them, yes, I'm moving. And here we are 15 years later, still at now High Life. And moved from veterinarian to director of animal health, and now managing a team of 9 people, a couple of swine vets and some technicians. So it's been a very good journey.
Oh, wonderful! Yeah, that's fascinating. Quite a distance from home, and so just for the benefit of our audience as well, Karine, is High Life? Are there all their pigs located in Manitoba, or do you get into Saskatchewan or Alberta at all?
Correct. So most of our pigs are in Manitoba. We do have a few farms in Saskatchewan, a little bit.
And by the way, just as a quick aside, I'll mention that quite a number of years ago at Iowa Swine Day, there was a speaker from High Life who was talking about biosecurity, and especially with respect to transporting of feed and the procedures that you folks had in place to try to minimize the transmission of disease, of pathogens through the truck and through the truck driver, and the steps that you went through. And it was very, very, there was a lot of people taking an awful lot of notes when your colleague gave that presentation, because it was very different than what I think our people in Iowa and the Midwest were used to. So that was one of my introductions to the very serious nature that High Life takes when it comes to biosecurity. So today we're going to be talking about trying to understand who it is visiting the farm. We're going to be talking about something about geofencing software. I'm not familiar, so I'm looking forward to that as well, and really taking biosecurity to the next level. So help me to understand, first off, what it is we're going to be talking today, and then we'll break it down into little bite-sized chunks maybe.
Absolutely, yeah. The geofencing software, I guess it's a new era in the biosecurity world. Something definitely I'm passionate about. Before I had to deal with PD, but like most people, probably most of our audience know, Manitoba, we've been hit hard on a cyclic pattern with PD in the last 6 years, and the last wave was terrible. And so those geofencing software, really what it does, it's a virtual fence you have around your farm, and it detects the movement in and off your premise. In simple terms, as simple as I can do it. So imagine a fence around the farm, but it's not an actual fence, it's a virtual fence. And anytime someone with the app on their phone or the GPS link to it cross on your premise or off, you can see their visit. So that's what a geofencing service would do. Now it is even way more. We'll get into this. It has lots of benefit, and why we got there at High Life, it was again PD, our journey with PD, and doing disease investigation. Really, that's where it started. We were doing contact tracing. It would take hours, couple days, lots of people involved, trying to get scheduled, where people went, where they came from, and trying to find a connection between all of that. And when you have an outbreak, trying to stop the next move as fast as you can. And it was not efficient. When you have one outbreak, it's one thing, but when PD comes, it doesn't usually come alone for us. So it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and keep counting. It became overwhelming. And then we had work with a company. It's a Canadian company called Farmel Guardian. We've been in touch with them for a couple of years before. And then eventually that was the trigger point for us. We did a pilot project in 2021, put 30 farms on it and start to learn the software. And it was a no-brainer. It became reality as we started breaking with PD and we saw the use of that software. It was a no-brainer for us. Then we adopted it and geofence every facility we have. So farm premise, but also truck wash, feed mill, in any facility that relate to our pig business pretty much.
Is the packing plant included then as well?
Yes, the packing plant is part of it, obviously, yes.
Right on. Oh, wow.
Swine Veterinary Partners offers a full range of animal health and production services to Canadian pork producers. We approach health management through personalized solution with concern for profitability while taking into account performance and the well-being of your animals.
And one of the things that I found fascinating in an earlier presentation that you had made, Karine, was that the importance of people leaving a premise as well as people entering a premise. And the moment you said that, I said, well, of course, right? It just makes so much sense because when you enter the premise, you might be bringing in pathogens, but when you leave, you might be taking pathogens somewhere else. So all of a sudden I realized that in my simplistic approach, I was only considering half of the issue. So that really fascinated me. So if you don't mind, could you just talk about that just a little bit more? Maybe give some examples of why that's so important in an overall biosecurity plan.
Absolutely. And we call it biocontainment. And I would say you're not alone to overlook. And I was there too a couple of years ago. You talk a lot about how to not introduce pathogen to a farm. We shower in, we sign in into the farm, we disinfect our supplies in, and we took so many control points of how can we prevent disease from coming in. But then we forgot, if ever it gets in, how do we prevent from spreading it to our neighbors, our own farms? And with PD, that's when, again, like I said, I'll talk a lot about PD because that's my experience with disease in Manitoba, not so much with PRRS, but PD is you have to learn fast. It spread very quickly, very contagious disease. So in that case, biocontainment became very important because when a farm break with PD, it excretes a lot of virus and everything around the farm become contaminated. So anything you take out of the farm, your shoes, you will be contaminated. We tested around the premise, so the closed perimeters, around feed bins, everything is PD positive. So then we start brainstorming and say, how do we not bring this from the site to the next site with feed truck, with people, with livestock truck, with all the traffic we have on site? So then we start focusing more on biocontainment, where it gets difficult for people. And even now, I'm in that battle right now because PD is super quiet, cross our finger. It's to keep reminding people that we don't know a farm has a disease until it's too late. So people think it's like a light switch on the wall. You get PD, you'll know for sure, and then you will start to put a measure in place to prevent spreading it. But it's too late already because usually by the time, and PD is a quick one, you should know within a few days, but it can be up to 2 weeks before you actually know your pigs have PD in a finishing site. PRRS could take even longer. I've seen PRRS outbreak being missed for a month to 6 weeks before we actually trigger hey, something is going on my farm. Let's do diagnostic. Something is not normal. Oh, it's PRRS. 6 weeks is a lot of time that you can contaminate your neighbors. And that's where to change that mindset of every day when you go into a farm, yes, biosecurity, go in and protect that farm. But when you come out, just assume there's something there that you don't want to bring to the next farm.
Right. Karine, there might be other things that you want to speak about, and feel free to do so. But I just have a couple of questions that have come up that I think might be of interest to the listening audience. And one of them is, can you, just based on your experience, talk about what are some of the vehicles by which the virus can be spread? So let's say I'm a farmer and I have 3 sites. I'm a relatively small producer, but I have 3 sites and one site has broken. What are the things that I really need to pay attention to that I will not transmit the PED from the one site which has broken to my other 2 sites which have not, at least at this point, we think they haven't yet.
So there's anything that you move can carry disease. So it doesn't matter if it's a person, a vehicle, supplies, a tool. So the easiest way in the pyramid of biosecurity, the ultimate is just don't bring it. Don't bring anything from barn to barn. So that's totally avoiding the potential risk. If you don't move anything from barn to barn, you're not moving the virus with it. Now, it's not realistic for everything we do in our swine world. You need to move feed, for example. You need to move, not feed, but a feed truck needs to go from farm to farm, or service providers need to do their job and need to go from farm to farms. So then it's the next step is decontamination, finding a way to make sure things are clean between sites. So when you ask about what type of vehicles, I would say anything. It doesn't matter. Now, people have to really make a list of and look at what's coming on and off. And that's where a geofence software, like we've implemented. So we kind of know what's going on our site, but it's until it becomes so visual on a computer screen and you see exactly how many people and where and how often. It was shocking. Some of our sites say, how many visits did we add in one day? Like, wow, that was like an eye-opener for everyone around the table. We know we have feed delivery. We know we have livestock. We know we have service provider, electrician, maintenance, gas fitter, Manitoba hydro. Like, there's so many people that needs to come on our site with good reason. But to be able to actually visualize it as a number was very useful. And the next step is where they go. So you described the example of a farmer with 3 farms. Okay, but maybe some of his service providers, like I'm thinking his feed delivery, unless he has a feed mill on site, is probably servicing a lot more than 3 sites. And all of that geofencing becomes very useful to make sure we see those connections.
The geofencing, I'm starting to understand it just a little bit, and you're describing it really, really well. And it makes me think of the old management adage that you can't manage what you don't measure.
That's a good way of saying it. Yes.
Well, that's exactly what, if I understand it, what geofencing is doing is helping you to measure what that movement is.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it makes it very easy to see it on a map, on a list, and to measure the implication, I guess.
Right. That's I find that really really fascinating. And by the way, you made the comment earlier. I'm not worried if you just focus on PED, right? Because I think that's of great interest in Canada, and so we don't need to worry about other diseases. I have one very specific question which comes up so often. It comes up at the university when students are coming to class and they're going to the barn to work in the barn. Cell phones. How much of a risk are cell phones?
Oh, yeah. Well, there's something, like I say, it doesn't matter who you are or what you are or what. If you're bringing something in a farm, they're a risk. So it doesn't matter if it's a cell phone or a notepad or a pen or so. If you again, let's go with elimination. Do not bring it in if you don't need it. Then it's no risk. If you absolutely need it, more and more we rely on technology. I know I do. I personally do my vet visit with an iPad. So we have a way of bringing our iPad into the farm. So we put them in a Ziploc bag, sealed, and then we spray the Ziploc once we're in. We wipe it with a disinfectant wipe on top of that. We're paranoid, but if you absolutely need it, we do bring it. So I would apply for a cell phone. But our number one rule is if you can live without, don't bring it.
Don't bring it in. Yeah, great. Okay, very good. Okay, so let's continue on then. So this has been a really interesting. Was there more you wanted to talk about the geofencing, or did you want to move further along?
No, I have another good learning for us. So when we were doing our contact tracing, one of the reason I like it so much is we were using schedule. So the best tool we had was scheduling. So for livestock trailer, I had the schedule. For the washing crew, it was a schedule. For the vaccination crew, it was a schedule. And you assume the schedule is precise. So that's what we had to work with and see where the people or the equipment went before and then went after. What we discovered with the geofencing app, so like I said, we have people, we have the app on our phone. That's how it works. As soon as you're detected on the geofence, it pick up your visit. On equipment like livestock and feed truck, we have it integrated with the GPS system we already had. So simple. So that's how all our equipment is geofenced or part of the geofencing system. When we start comparing the two, what we realized at first, we were not trusting the geofence software. We would call in people and say, hey, the geofence system is telling me you did that. And it was not a breach in biosecurity. Everything was correct. They did the right thing. But then we were calling them on an outbreak report and say, hey, I've seen that you went from this farm to this farm, but it doesn't match your schedule. So obviously the software is wrong. And then they're like, oh, no, actually what happened? So I had an injection crew that was exactly, we were running a report and then we call in the employee and we say, hey, what happened there? And then he explained, he said, well, the job was not finished. And with biosecurity downtime, I could go back. So I finished my job at farm A and went back to farm B to finish the job, but the schedule never catch that. So in that contact tracing report, we found out right away, we put the farm under biocontainment because now that was a real risk. He went from a farm that broke with PD back to a farm that did not have PD at the time. On the same day, he took a shower, everything was fine. He parked far from the barn. Fortunately, the second barn never broke with PD. So it shows that good biosecurity measures do prevent disease. But in that case, it allow us to immediately biocontain the next farm to avoid, if they would break, to continue the cycle of breaking more farms. So a tool like a geofencing software like that, like Farm Algorithm, it just make it more real and more accurate. While schedule, we all know schedule change all the time and people don't go and correct them after the fact. So we've been seeing a lot of that where the schedule were not as accurate as they should have been after the fact. And the geofence software just don't lie. It's actually what's happening in real time.
Right. But that's right. You still need to have that validation component to that project because raising pigs is not completely predictable. Right?
No, it's not.
Very good. Okay. So then let's move along then to further components of your biosecurity system that you have put in place or are putting in place in order to get a real handle on PED.
Oh, there's so much. I guess any that would listen to that say, what can I do, is really do a big scrub of your biosecurity. And for us, it's a constant work. It's not something we do and then we forget about it. We're constantly reviewing our biosecurity, biocontainment, how we can do it better, make it stronger. And really one thing now that we want long-term is not be so reactive. For sure, when PD hit, we'll be reactive. But if our biosecurity and biocontainment is strong at all time, even when there's no PD, it means even if PD comes to one of our farm, we don't have to change everything because it's strong enough to withhold one of our farm breaking with PD and not spreading it everywhere. And that's where the biosecurity was always great. We can always make it better for sure. But biocontainment was not as strong. And that's one thing we've been doing a lot. So the geofencing, doing faster outbreak report to be able to stop the next outbreak faster. That's one. Also CAS line, control access zone. So what we do is permanent CAS. So in PD world, like I say, PD, when a farm has it, the PD is shed so much the virus, it gets blown away from the fans outside the farm. And we've tested enough to know that the perimeters around the farm is very positive. So what we want is to avoid vehicles from employees to be contaminated and then they bring it back in town to their house and co-workers and whoever they cohabitate with. So what we do is we park really far from the barn. Yeah, we take a little healthy walk every day, back and forth. Nobody complains in summer, but I can tell you, we have a lot of complaint in winter. It's not a nice walk in Manitoba, -40 when the wind is picking up. And sometimes it can be half a mile just to walk to the barn. It is far. And it's really to be safe, like a quarter mile would be probably more, it all depends on the farm is designed, how close to the road and where we can park. But the rule is as far away as you can from the fans, still on the premise of the barn if possible. And that is one big change. We were implementing that usually in PD season. before the PD or when we were getting hit with PD. And now we're going more to permanent CAS. So we have actually now invested in some little shed for at least our big 6,000 sows. And then you park your vehicles, we put plug-in, because in winter, not plugging in vehicles in Manitoba is not a good thing. So we've invested in a parking pad with plug-in, actually, far from the barn. There's a shed there where people are expected to take their street shoes off and wear boots from the farm, and even they can leave their jackets there, and then they walk. That's a first layer, and then you walk on the premise to the farm, and then you still shower in. So it's kind of a second layer. So that is definitely due to all the PD we've been having, and that knowledge that it's too late by the time we know, and that yard is contaminated with PD.
Right. Yeah. So, wow, so many components, and so much, so important, because PED, if I understand correctly, it travels easily. The virus travels easily, and it doesn't take a very large dose to lead to illness. So that makes it particularly contagious, I guess. Is that the right
Yeah,
word?
Very contagious, very infectious.
Yeah. Both contagious and infectious. Wow. Okay. So again, I'd like to, we've got some more time left, and if there's other things you would like to share with us, that would be great, Karine. But I'm interested in particular in if you can give us examples of how you believe these procedures have allowed you to reduce the impact of PED on the high life system. So in other words, do you have any data or even anecdotes? I mean, you and I are both scientists, like we prefer data, can't always get it, but just what do you think this has meant to your organization? Because you've obviously invested a huge amount of time and effort, and I'm sure therefore expense, and to implement these procedures. And I'm curious, and I know enough about your organization, at least from years past. You don't spend money unless you feel you're getting value for it. You feel it's an important topic, you want to get better at it, but you also want to validate that you are getting value. So help me to understand that a little, and help our audience understand that a little bit better, Karine.
Yeah, and it's a frustrating journey, I would say, we're on. It's not always a rewarding. So our PD story started in 2017. And since then, we've implemented, like you see, we've invested so much money in what we think is better biosecurity, stronger biosecurity. But then 19 came and we got hit as hard, a little bit less hard for high life, but still too much to say we were happy with it. And then 2021, 2022 was just bad for many reasons. And I think that one we could explain probably a combination of we were coming out as an industry, as everybody, out of COVID. We were short-staffed. People were tired already to be told biosecurity around COVID stuff. Being short-staffed in farm did not help to implement proper measure and then get rid of PD fast enough. So there was a lot of things, but it feels like we did not make progress. But I would say what we've seen in our outbreak disease investigation, and that's why they're so important, is a shift. What could bring PD in? So I know in 17, for example, we started building a lot of bake bay. So High Life, we have 3 operating bake bay for our trailers. We saw trailers as a high risk. And back in the days, back before 2017, we used to do back and forth with slaughter plant. We would take market hogs, bring them to the plant, come back, pick up more market hogs, go back to the plant. And why would we wash? We're going to be empty in 2 weeks. And that was our rules. About 2 weeks, you can do back and forth as much as you want. And the idea behind was, well, if we get hit with a disease, thinking PRRS at the time, PD was not in the picture, it was say, well, we're going to dump that barn and we're good to go. PD is a different beast. If they break late finishing, we stop shipping for a month because those pigs they're shedding too much. So that totally changed our vision. So then we built big bay, wash bay, increase our staff. We started no more back and forth ever. You don't break the rules. Everything has to be washed, even for market hogs. And genetic was already very well taken care of, but and then you're like, cross your fingers, and then a few other things we improve, and then you say, okay, we should be good now. And then 19 comes and it's something else. So it's been that's the problem with biosecurity and it's frustrating for people, because you can say, well, you know what? I have 20 things I can do for biosecurity. I'm going to pick 5 that I like, and the rest I don't care. It doesn't work like that. The virus, bacteria comes in all of those different ways. what we have to do, and that's a good exercise we've done at High Life, is look at all the ways you can think of. We had a big brainstorming session actually for us on every single potential way disease could come in our system and spread from barn to barn. And then we ranked them in how important, how likely they are to happen, and what would be their impact, I guess. So we weighted them because there's so much. Like, you should have seen that board. It was full. So we probably identify over 300 possible ways of disease entering in our system, but we ranked them. And then from there, we started to focus on where we thought it was higher chance of coming in or having a higher impact in our system. And then we just go at it one at a time. We tackled, so employee training was one we identified. So it's one thing to have good infrastructures like bake bay or wash bays or perfect showers into your barn that are nice. If people don't use those infrastructure properly, you're not better at it. And that was one of our point when we did that big exercise. We said, okay, we have infrastructure. We invested a lot in the last few years, but we felt that we lacked on training people, making sure they understand the importance, they're using it properly. SOP, so standard operating procedures, that are too complicated to follow. That's one of those two. You need to go back and say, okay, we used to do that 10 years ago. Is that still applicable? Or can we simplify it so people actually do it the right way? Sometimes a simple way that is maybe not as perfect, but is followed every time, is better than a complicated way that might be more perfect, but no one can do it because it's too complicated. So we go and try to get also a lot of feedback from everyone. So if you're a feed truck driver and we're asking you to do something, I want to hear back, because I'm not a feed truck driver. I want to hear, is that something actually is feasible? And is there, you think you can sustain it over time? And if not, let's review what we can do better, and asking people their input. So when you ask, all of that, is there payback? No, it's been, yes, there is, but it's seen that it's been shifting as the years go. So I see biosecurity and biocontainment as a forever job. It's not something we'll ever be able to close the book on and say, you know what, this project is done, let's move on. No, there'll always be something we can do better. And those diseases really teach you that you can never let your guard down, but you can always be better at it, more efficient, and learn from it.
As I listen, and going back to my earlier question, but as I listen to your answers, in the learning process and making progress, and we often hear in our industry, progress is 2 steps forward and 1 step back, because nothing is ever in a straight line, of course. But it brings to mind, even when we're trying to solve simple problems in a barn, like tail biting. Tail biting is a multifactorial issue. You can fix one thing and tail biting will keep going. You fix something important, but you still have tail biting. You have to get all of the components of tail biting looked after before that you will control tail biting. The difference here is you're dealing with a highly infectious and contagious pathogen, and so there's so many more factors involved that you have to control. But it's the only way you can make progress, Karine, right? Is to do it in a methodical, I haven't got the right word, but proper steps so that you can learn as you go along and you get a little bit better every time.
Exactly. And always reassess. I really hope we don't need PD anymore to teach us that we're not good enough. It's something we do. We take it as a failure. Every time you have a PD outbreak, it's a failure. It hurt hard on your pockets, for sure, on the moral, because of how devastating that disease is. But as a biosecurity, it's also a failure. It means we did something wrong. The disease was able to come in anyway. But that's a bit, again, that geofencing tool, it's tools like that we constantly use to audit ourselves. So we don't need the disease. I would prefer to just be able to catch our weakness just by running audit. We do on-farm audit for biosecurity. We do those online audit now to make sure that protocols are being followed for trucks or people, and being able to address the gaps we're finding. So our ultimate goal is to be able to run false outbreak. I prefer to stay in the false. And we run those regularly, say, hey, this farm just broke. Let's practice how fast we can do the trace back and what we find for gaps. And I can tell you, we always find gaps. Nothing is perfect. So really, it's just a continuous work. We find gaps, we improve them, and then we work on them. And the other thing, in a big system like High Life, it's not just one farm. If a producer is hearing that and say, one farm, you can do it. You can achieve it. It won't be perfect, but now you have to multiply that by 150, 160 in my case. And you're looking and say, okay, this farm is actually really good, but what about the 140 farms? And are they all at the same status? And the goal is to bring everybody up, because that's the other thing with biosecurity. It's not one producer job. It's not one company's job. It's everyone. Yes, someone can be better, and location is key. If you're alone on your island, you have a good chance. But otherwise, we can throw rocks at most of our neighbors, and our neighbors is often ourselves. But our farms are so close, so interlinked that everybody has to have great biosecurity. And that's also the next challenge. It's not just having great biosecurity, it has to be great biosecurity as an industry.
Yes. Yes. Wow. Well, that's very good. And Karine, I'd kind of like to wrap up here a little bit. And to start it off, I'm going to ask sort of, what do you think are the most important take-home messages from our conversation today? And while you're thinking of that, I'd like to just share with you one of I consider very valuable take-home messages that I learned, and that is that biosecurity is a two-way process. It's not only worrying about what's going into the facility, but also worrying what is coming out from the facility. That was a new lesson for me today. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm admitting to the world that I was ignorant on that. And but I wonder if you could share maybe one or two or three other what you think are important take-home messages from our conversation today.
Yeah, definitely. If the listener can remember that biosecurity is one thing, but biocontainment is as important. Everyone should look at their farm and think, what if I had the disease today? How would I spread it to my neighbors or my other farms? That would be key. Also, to not be discouraged. Like I told our story a little bit, biosecurity in biocontainment, it's a continuous improvement job. Like it will never end. You can always find ways to be better. And you should. So that's very important. And then the third one would be use the tools available. There's amazing tools nowadays, amazing technology like those geofencing. That's only one we talk about today, but there's great tool to help us improve on our biosecurity biocontainment journey. So,
right, absolutely.
It's time for our famous three. The Nutrition Athena, Shakespeare Mill, Farmhouse, and Nutrition Partners Nutrition Group offer the full range of nutritional product based on extensive research and developments, and a solid team of experts all across Canada. Our objective is to provide cost-effective solutions, innovation, and support to producer from the entire Canadian swine industry.
Well, thank you so much, Karine. Now I have our famous three questions to end the podcast with. And the first question, of course, is do you have a swine-related publication or a health-related book or resource that you would recommend to our listeners as a resource or a book that they should read?
Yeah, I'm more of a website person. Books, I mean, it's taking space, and we just moved into our new space. They made sure we had no room to store anything. But no, I really like two websites. I would say for vets, it's the AASV website. I find it very useful to find anything, and from pictures to just proceeding from different conference, or the pig site. I really like that one too. And there's lots of other very good website that are pig related. So.
Okay, then, and you are a member of your generation when you say you're not a book person, you're a website person. So, and that's okay. We can modify the question. So now my next question, of course, then is book or a website that you would recommend. It's not related to swine, but you've just found helpful professionally, but isn't necessarily swine related.
Yeah, I don't know if it's professionally, but I love reading book. So although it's audiobook most of the time because I do a lot of driving. And just recently, I was preparing for this podcast, and just recently we have a little group. We have like a reading group, and I mean it has to be about pigs. We're all swine vet here, so so it's Animal Farm. It's nothing recent, but Animal Farm from George Orwell. I don't know if the listener will have listened. I found it. I had never read it, and I found it quite interesting. And those three pigs take over that little world there, thinking they'll make it better, but they don't really make it better. So something interesting, more philosophical, if someone wants to hear it. It's very short too. So
it's amazing that man wrote that book. What's that, 40, 50 years ago or more?
1945. I went on the website to find it today.
Wow.
Yeah. it's very actual too. Yeah, very interesting book.
You bet. And then the final question, which I find fascinating, and different people have different perspectives. But from your point of view, Karine, what is it that separates the people that you interact with in the industry, you work with in the industry, the people who are really, very successful at what they do, compared to, sort of the average? What sets those successful people apart from others?
Mm. Probably a few things, but I'm thinking being passionate about what you do is one thing. People that loves what they do, it leads to success, I think. And knowing the right people, knowing, not being shy of asking questions too, and surrounding ourselves of passionate people probably makes you a better person.
Right, right. Yeah, that's passionate. It's contagious, right? And and as I listen to you today, you're obviously passionate about what you do, Karine, and I also know you've got um, very, very significant responsibilities there at High Life. So I particularly thank you for taking time to join us and share your knowledge and perspective and your experiences with our audience today. So, Karine, thank you so very much. It's been a real pleasure listening to you.
Well, it was my pleasure too. Thank you.